This week on the Powell Not Found podcast, what else can we talk about? But Juan Soto has signed with the New York Metropolitans for more money than I can even imagine. We're also going to talk a little bit about Max Fried being a Yankee and the Disney Plus show, The Skeleton Crew, here on this episode. Let's hit it. Let's go.
I'm going to tell you a story about a girl who loves gin. A national pandemic seized her birthday celebration. Although she knew it was coming, we tried not to tell her. She brewed some Irish breakfast tea. She knew her birthday was getting corona.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 47 on the episode for the week of December 12th. This is the Powell Not Found podcast with your host, Mark Powell. Go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Powell Not Found, youtube.com at Powell Not Found, and go to Apple Podcasts, go to Spotify. We are up and listed on there, and go subscribe and review the show, leave a comment. I'll interact with positive comments, nice comments, and stuff like that. The bad comments, well, I'm just not going to interact with them because they're dumb. But anyways, we have a lot to talk about, and we mentioned the first topic of the show earlier this week on Sunday night, right when we thought everything was going to be peaceful, it was going to be nice. I was sitting down watching a documentary and feeling like it was good. It was good to go. On Sunday night at 10 o'clock, the weekend was rattled by the news of Juan Soto being signed by the New York Metropolitans, ripping away what could have been a franchise player for the Yankees away from the New York Yankees, and Steve Cohen really flexing that financial might that he has been, let's face it, just talking about for years. So it was a little bit of a shock, but not that surprising in retrospect. And what's been more surprising is really the reaction to this whole situation. To which I say, Yankee fans, how are we doing? It has been 4 days. It has been really enlightening, I guess is the word, to see the reaction online to Soto going from franchise hero that sends you to the World Series in Cleveland with a clutch home run, clutch insurance home run, to essentially the villain. When Soto comes back to Yankee Stadium, that is going to be must-see TV. I mean, if they haven't already locked down the ESPN rights for that game, and what the reaction is going to be from the fan base should be interesting. Now, as a Yankee fan, and this is full disclosure, I can't sit here and lie to you and say that I wasn't disappointed by the news, because Juan Soto is a great hitter. He changed the face of the Yankees franchise. I mean, the Yankees in 2023 were coming off of a season that they were 82-80. It was like their worst season since 1993. And you could tell there was tension. There was Brian Cashman was fiery, and he was, fighting openly with the media. It was actually kind of nice to see, the mighty Yankees go a little bit awry away from their usual buttoned up approach and their usual professional reaction. And to see them in the offseason of 2023 go and get Juan Soto by trading some critical players. Michael King is not an easy pitcher to walk away from. As you can see, he had a pretty successful year with the Padres, right? He was a great reliever turned starter. Looked like he had a lot of potential. But to see them try to really push for a 2024 endeavor was something so nice to see after a disappointing and frankly a really boring baseball season to watch as a fan. And you knew at some point that there was going to be this possibility. And so you took 2023 for what it was. It was seeing them change the face of the franchise and seeing them change the I shouldn't say face of the franchise, is seeing them change their approach with a hitter that was so dynamic. To see a 1-2 punch like Aaron Judge to Juan Soto, Aaron Judge, and then backed up by a Giancarlo Stanton was a sight to see in the playoffs, right? It's a main reason why we got so far in the postseason. And so you can't sit here and say that it didn't hurt and sting to see a dynamic player like that leave. And on Sunday night, I was disappointed. I was shocked. I listened to the narrative being spun about how it was all about the money, and then you couldn't help but just kind of agree with what pundits and what talking heads and what the New York media was spinning, that it was all about it was all about the money. It was all about the money. He is a Boras client. There's not many examples. There are examples, but there's not many examples of clients not going with the top dollar figure, right? And yes, you can point to the Altuve. You can point to last year's train wreck of Scott Boras's core four there, not really signing until the last minute. But usually, 99% of the time, they'll go to the top dollar client. And it seemed like for a long time, it was going to be the Yankees. The Red Sox were kind of in contention for it a little bit. The Blue Jays seem to be year-to-year losers here when it comes to these big name free agents in Major League Baseball. But what ended up getting Juan Soto to the Mets was not the 16 years, $760 million that the Yankees offered, quite astoundingly. But it ended up being the 15 years, $765 million, which equates to about $51 million a year if you break it up, year by year. And he ended up choosing the Mets. And I had two thoughts initially. And you can see this initial reaction that I put up on the YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/PowellNotFound. One, good for him, right? If somebody's willing to pay you that much money to hit a ball, you run with it, right? That is the only choice. If someone's willing to pay you for your services that much money to hit a baseball and to make fans happy and to be the face of a franchise, you do it. 1, 2. My initial other thoughts was, the Yankees weren't that far behind. Would I have liked to see him stay in New York? Of course. I think that if you lose what is considerably number 3 in the MVP voting behind Judge and Ohtani, you're losing a really big chunk of your lineup. Soto, watching him every single day, I got more of an impression of the player that he is. Now, I reside in the Mid-Atlantic. I don't have access to Nats games unless I have cable. So I didn't get the opportunity to watch him every single day because of blackouts and because of those dumb things that are still in baseball right now. And hopefully maybe they won't be after the RSNs all go under. But I didn't watch him every single day. I knew that he was a presence, right? He was 19 years old when he brought a World Series to the Nationals, and he was a great hitter. But I didn't get the sense of how dynamic he was, that he was just an impossible out, right? Not only did he have power, but he had the contact of Altuve. The way he just approached each at-bat and each pitch with such confidence is something to see. And it's going to be great for every Mets fan that didn't watch a Yankees game. You're for 15 years, hopefully and ideally, you are going to watch one of the greatest hitters of all time, and something that basically the Mets have, for years have looked for that franchise player that they had in Piazza, right? That they had in Reyes, that they had in Wright to build around. Well, Alonso, right? Before this free agent market, and who knows if he's going to re-sign with the Mets. They've looked for that franchise player to build around and to build a team off of, right? Juan Soto is now your guy, and you're really going to enjoy seeing him play, right? My third reaction was, wow, that's a lot of money, right? That is a lot of money, and I'm kind of glad. And this is being said, and this is being reported, and blah, blah, blah. I'm glad as a Yankees fan that we didn't spend that much money. I mean, that's $250 million, right? The risk with putting $51 million a year on the table is if, and that's guaranteed, by the way, right? If you're not familiar with baseball, does no salary cap. It's not like other sports, right? You don't get that money back if they get injured, as they do in like the NHL. It's a guaranteed salary. Now, you never hope this for a player. You never hope. But if that $51 million gets hurt, the reaction is going to be insane, right? That's where you wonder, as a person who looks at the sport and sees these contracts getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, you start to wonder, when do the owners, the Steve Cohens, the George Steinbrenners, Hal Steinbrenners, I'm sorry, I'm living 20 years in the past, Hal Steinbrenner, right? When the learners, when is it too much risk to put in a player? I say that because last year, right, a couple years ago, before the Judge signing, they signed Cole, right? That was the big free agent of note, right? That was going to change the face of the franchise for the Yankees. And Cole was offered $36 million a year. This year, he was just up for an opt-out where he would get paid $38 million or $2 million more or whatever, make him the highest paid starting pitcher. And he opted out and then opted back in really quickly. It was a very weird transaction that still is yet to be rectified by the Yankees or explained by the Yankees. Last year, Judge missed 2 months of the season. Now, whatever, $36 million divided by 6, it was $6 million, right? So 2 months out of the season, that's $12 million that was sitting on the bench, right? When do you start to say that these contracts are so big that the risk is not worth it anymore? Because in 5 years, there's going to be another Juan Soto, right? There's going to be another version or incarnation of the best, the generational hitter. They keep on saying that Juan Soto is a generational talent. 2 years ago, Aaron Judge was a generational talent. A year ago, Shohei Ohtani was a generational talent. These generational talents seem to come around pretty often. I can't seem to understand why they keep on giving these people these monikers. They're just going to give it to another person 5 years from now, right? But my point is, when do the monetary value of these contracts become so big that when they get hurt, it becomes not worth it? When are you crippling your financial liability to pivot? These owners, these rich owners, right? People are waving off, I think, that conversation because they are assuming that Steve Cohen, with infinite funds, will just pay for everything no matter what. And in this case, yes, he might have, or he will, I guess, go into his own pocket to pay for this contract, right? He is showing that financial might that he has been teasing to an extent for 5 years, and only really showing it with the Verlander and the Max Scherzer deals, and they didn't turn out. And now he's showing it with Juan Soto. But at some point, there is an end to this money. And at what point do these owners say, enough is enough, right? We're shelling out too much money to these players that we know there's an infinite resource of players coming up through the farm system. We can try to find a different alternative. I mean, all these owners are praised for their investments, right? But they seem to be shelling out gigantic amounts of money to players to hit a ball, right? You know, it doesn't seem to make sense to me unless there's a piece of the puzzle, financial puzzle, that I just don't get. You know, like, when do they realize that there's a cheaper alternative waiting in the wings that they could pay 10 times less and have more money in their pocket? You know, that's, to me, the conversation that I think is going to come up in 2026, because at some point, Steve Cohen can't pay for every single player on the Mets, right? I'm sure the same thing was said by George Steinbrenner. There was an old Onion article I mentioned a number of times on this podcast just because it tickles me so much, of when the Yankees were doing this kind of financial trickery in the 90s and 2000s. There was an Onion article that says the Yankees insured the 27th pennant, this is before they won it, by buying every single player in baseball. We are approaching that territory with Steve Cohen. I just want to know, when is enough enough? And I think that's what's going to come up in these 2026 labor conversations, right? This contract, again, I just want to remind everybody, $765 million a year. And after 5 years of this 15-year contract, which will lead him to, I guess, 41 years old, right? 42, 41, 42. What is he, 26, 27? That if he opts out after a 5th year, the Mets can void the opt-out if they add $4 million a year to the contract to make it $55 million a year for the next 10 years, which brings it up to $805 million of potential value of the contract to hit a ball. I just want to remind everyone, $805 million to hit a ball. Now, in this world, and I'm being facetious, of course, this is monopoly money in baseball, but there are teachers, there are doctors, there are CEOs, there are people in your life that may be really rich, right? And the Mets are paying $805 million to Juan Soto to hit a ball. So I say to everybody who meets Juan Soto, who gets the opportunity to maybe potentially in the future sit down to dinner with Juan Soto and have a nice time, when the check comes and it's placed between you and Juan Soto better be getting that check, because there's probably not going to be a lot of people in this country that are going to have the financial might of Juan Soto. My goodness, $805 million potential value. That is crazy. It is, and you know what? It's been enlightening to see everybody talk about Steve Cohen and how this is going to affect baseball, and how they're praising Steve Cohen right now, much like they're praising Steve Cohen when they, signed Verlander, when they signed Scherzer, and that's fine. They deserve their moment. I'm happy for the Mets, right? But let's be clear. When Steve Cohen talks about, the Mets are paying for this contract, I take a little bit of issue with that, because Steve Cohen's not paying this contract. Steve Cohen is not paying $765 million. The Mets are not paying $765 million. They are not paying this contract. You know who's paying for this contract? Let me look right to the camera. You, the fan. The fans that go to Citi Field are the people that will be paying this $51 million a year. Think about it. The next time you go into Citi Field, the next time you stand in a line that's 20 minutes too long for your $25 hot dog and your $40 Coke, Just think about it as you bite in to that cold Frankfurter. You're not really taking a bite out of that grade F meat. You're taking a bite out of Juan Soto's $805 million contract. That's what's happening. Fans that are paying for jerseys. Fans that are paying $60 to park. Fans that are trying to go to a baseball game desperately. Families that are 5 kids, 6 kids that are sitting in the cheapest seat possible because that's the only way they financially can make it. They're the ones that are paying for Juan Soto's contract. So let's not confuse the fact that the fans are paying these gigantic salaries. Each year, since the 90s, the average ticket for a baseball price has gone up, 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 up. And it rarely goes down, 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 down. So let's be clear. With that said, because it's not as light as you want it to be, let's take a quick break. We'll talk a little bit about what the Yankees will do now that Juan Soto is no longer a Met. And we'll come back and we'll do the rest of the show. So let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody. Sorry, I had to... hold on one second. Ooh, that's why you have a mute button right there. Thanks, everybody. Welcome back to the show. We are talking about the Juan Soto contract. Juan Soto is a Met. Winter meetings was this week. There's been a lot of different deals. Garrett Crochet for a package of minor leaguers going to the Red Sox. Finally, the Red Sox are dipping their toes back into baseball activity. That should be good for the game. It's been too long since the Red Sox have actually spent money. So it's nice to see them actually going to try to be competitive again, right? Since they sold off Mookie Betts, right? Who is the player that they have to build around? Devers. They've failed each offseason to build a team that can really complement what Devers brings to the table for the Red Sox. So it's good to see them actually active again. A healthy AL East is a more competitive and a more fun AL East to watch. The Yankees, man, they didn't waste any time, right? All this talk about Juan Soto not doing it for the money, again, it turned out to be that the case, right? It's a Scott Boras classic case once again. But interesting little details coming out of this signing come from Mets reporters, coming from, I believe, Andy Martino. I could be misattributing that, so forgive me if I am. Saying that it might have been John Heyman. Anyway, don't quote me on this. There have been New York reporters saying that basically the decision came down to the extra amenities that weren't available to Juan Soto. So the Yankees didn't offer like a personal suite, right, for Juan Soto's family. Juan Soto very, very clear that he's, wanting to be with his family. He's very close with his family, that it's important for them to be part of the game, and the Yankees would not budge when it came down to those kind of concessions for players, right? This has happened many times, right, in the Yankees locker room, right? Not many times with free agents, but with players on the team. I mean, Roger Clemens tried to get his own personal trainer in there. They would not let him. I don't believe that Aaron Judge's personal batting coach is allowed in the clubhouse, or that might have been relaxed. But the Yankees have very firm policies. The idea of this contract coming down to those little things Specifically, the Yankees tell players if they want a suite for their family, they must pay for it. And that's been the case for a long, long time. And Steve Cohen just threw in the suite. In most cases, I would frown upon them doing this to get the player. But there's a couple reasons why I'm kind of glad that the Yankees brass stuck to their guns a little bit. You know, in the past, we've talked about on this podcast how I feel like the Yankees have to stop and relax a little bit, show a little bit more emotion, right? Stop with this militaristic attitude that was brought upon by George Steinbrenner, right? Why can't they have facial hair? Because you can't have facial hair in the Army, right? Like that was their thing, to look more professional, right? The Mets are kind of fostering, especially since the advent of Buck Showalter, who gets conveniently forgotten in this entire Mets buildup, right? But Buck Showalter kind of blew down the doors after the Wilpon sold the team to Cohen, right? About making it more of a family environment. These seem to be factors that made a difference with Juan Soto. I'm glad the Yankees didn't do that, though, because there's a couple things going on, right? If the Yankees had signed Juan Soto, if the Yankees had given them all the concessions, right, you're kind of putting Judge in an awkward position, right? Like, he's the captain of the team, right? But you're giving another player an enormous, almost double the salary, right? Total value, I should add, of Judge's, right? It is double value, right? Yeah, it is. You're also giving him more concessions that he wasn't allowed to get, right? And I know, the market only gets better for people who are younger and people who reach it later, right? They reap the benefits sometimes of people who kind of break too early. Seems to be the case with Judge, but he still is the captain of the team. So to offer those concessions for him, it's kind of like waving a white flag saying, hey, well, we tried with your generation. We're moving on to the next iteration of who the face of the franchise is going to be, right? This could have been part of the decision for them not to offer him these kind of concessions. But also at the same time, the player is getting paid $765 million with the potential of $805 million. They could buy a suite. They could buy the ballpark. I mean, I think Yankee Stadium was built for $2 billion. That's a little more than 2 Juan Soto careers. He could buy a suite, right? I just think in the end, it ended up coming down to basically what the money was, and also if Juan Soto really appreciates being close with his family, by them basically conceding to give him those extra kind of perks, those end up being the differentiators in things that are very, very close. Now, granted, there is a spin in the media that's saying that, the money was really close. Well, if you break it out with AAV, it ends up not being close at all, right? You can't walk away from that much money and say it was really just about a club suite, right? Or it was about free parking when you're coming to the ballpark. It just doesn't make sense at some point, right? So I will say that I'm glad that the Yankees kind of stuck to their guns here. Also, it opens up financial flexibility, right? It's not obviously $700 million a year, but if you break down what the Yankees offer was, it ended up being around 47, 48 million. You have $48 million to spend. And if you know anything about the Yankees payroll, right? These contracts, these long-term contracts can be structured in a lot of different ways. If you actually look on Fangraphs, now this is completely estimated, I assume. I don't know how Fangraphs gets these projections, but if you look at the way that Juan Soto's contract is structured, he gets paid like $67 million for the first 13 years, and it comes down to $46 million, right? This is all, by the way, this is all not deferred. This is not like the Shohei Ohtani contract, which was, he deferred $68 million of it to be paid at a later date. He's getting paid $2 million a year and then getting his salary of his back paid salary. This is guaranteed no deferral money. But the way that these contracts can be structured are kind of creative in a lot of different ways. They can kind of be like bell-shaped, if you will, where they start off small, they get really big in the middle, and then they kind of drop off towards the end, right? They're not completely just split by year, by salary, by number of years, and that's it. So they have now financial flexibility, at least $47 million to do something with. And the Yankees did. They went out and signed Max Fried from the Atlanta Braves, a starting pitcher, to an 8-year, $218 million deal. Now, the Yankees have been steadfast about getting starting pitching, and they did so. And they pivoted quickly after the Mets signed Soto, right? They've been steadfast about wanting to get pitching. They've signed Rodon to a long-term contract. They signed Cole to a long-term contract. They signed Max Fried, who is no pitcher to sneeze at, right? He is going to be a really interesting number 3, number 2 starter behind Cole. And now they have, even last year, I thought we had an overabundance of starting pitching. We now have starting pitching that we can start giving away like Oprah. We almost have an abundance of it, which is very rare in today's game. But they have now the financial flexibility to go out and get more players, right? The Yankees pivoted with Max Fried. They're in the hunt for Kyle Tucker. Let's not forget, the Yankees team has holes, right? Anthony Rizzo is not returning unless something completely changes in the market. He's not returning. He's a free agent this year. They can buy him out for $6 million, and I believe they did. Gleyber Torres is probably not returning. There's an empty first base, second base. Shortstop is covered. Third base is covered by Jazz. Jazz could move to second base, which opens up an opportunity for Nolan Arenado, maybe in St. Louis, right? Bregman, potentially, if the Yankees are willing to deal with the Houston Astros, right? Which, by the way, it is the cheating scandal. But, hey, forgive and forget, right? They would only make it to the World Series if Houston didn't cheat. They wouldn't have. Who knows if they would have won it? They also have some liabilities in the outfield, right? If Judge goes to right field, as Cashman stated at the winter meetings, and Dominguez slots in at center field, you still have this emptiness at left field with Alex Verdugo. You got the DH wrapped up by Giancarlo Stanton for the next 3 years, 4 years, however long that contract is, which used to be really expensive, and now it just seems like it's child's play. And so you still have holes to fill. So with that money, that $47 million maximum, right, that they were going to give to Juan Soto, and with some money coming off the books, they still have room to play, right? There's been talk about Caleb Durbin, a promising second baseman coming up from the minor leagues and filling in that hole for Gleyber, right? They have the money to go and get some people, right? It's not going to be Willy Adames as he signed with the Giants, right? But you have the flexibility to move some of these players around. Christian Walker is another name from the Arizona Diamondbacks that keeps on getting floated, right, as a possibility. And so in a way, I think it was Jeff Passan that basically said the Yankees might be better off, right? That's exactly how I felt after about 5 seconds hearing that Juan Soto had signed with the Mets, because the Yankees didn't need to rinse and repeat last year. The World Series showed everybody in 5 games that the Yankees were not complete enough. That they got it's almost like they got an energy drink boost in the middle of in the season, and it jolted them to the World Series. And then eventually the holes came out and exposed just how traditionally unfit they were to play winning baseball. And so with this financial flexibility now, I think they can do more things, right? And also it gives them a little bit of room, right, at the trade deadline. We always talk about this when they sign a big player in the offseason. Do they still have the money to move? They're always trying to keep a little bit of flexibility so they can add to the team, right? Well, now they have a lot of holes to fill. They have a lot of money that they put on the table that he didn't take. So take that money and distribute, right? Yeah, you probably can't get 4 or 5 players, right? That's not the case, but you can distribute that money as they just did with Max Fried. And now with the abundance of starting pitching, by the way, there's Garrett Cole, there is Max Fried, there's Carlos Rodon, there's Luis Gil, there's Nestor, there is Marcus Stroman, right? One of these people are not going to be starting, right? So get rid of some people that have Clark Schmidt. I'm forgetting Clark Schmidt. One of these people, you could have a long man on the roster. That's not an ideal spot for any kind of baseball player to be in, but you want to be able to deal these people to get a better team, a team that kind of emphasizes contact a little bit more. Pete Alonso, right? I know that there doesn't seem to be interest in New York bringing on that kind of, as they say, that kind of bat, a right-handed bat to replace Soto, a left-handed bat. It's not going to be the same, but it's an opportunity, right, to bring in a veteran player, right, a fun player, if he's interested. I love the fact that they have flexibility. It's been the most exciting offseason for the Yankees, losing this player than it would have been had they retained Juan Soto. And that is a confusing place to be, because a lot of the narrative has been that the Mets are the new Yankees, right? And it's kind of funny considering that, like, even when the Mets signed the biggest player in baseball, somehow the story is still about the Yankees, right? So as much as the narrative has been dictated towards the Yankees feeling like they've lost a step, right? As much as the narrative has been driven towards what would have George done? Is George rolling around in his grave, right? Give credit to the Yankees and give credit to Brian Cashman, right? Who pivoted and is doing the thing that you want him to do as a fan, which is redistribute that money and have financial flexibility so that you can not only sign the big free agent, but you can make the team better, and you don't just rinse and repeat and put the same thing out. We've had a bunch of those years where they didn't do enough, or they said they were going to do more and they didn't. And this doesn't appear to be the Yankees stopping here, right? Who knows? Corbin Burns might be a Yankee. It would seem like an overabundance of starting pitching, but let's not just negate it, right? Not yet. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see where this team is. I'm more excited for this team without Juan Soto than I am with it. Would I have liked Juan Soto? Of course. Who wouldn't? The guy is a dynamic, incredible player. But I think the idea of revamping and changing the whole structure of the team, that is what makes me excited to be a Yankees fan. Really quick, before we take a little bit of another break and we talk about the Skeleton Crew, just initial thoughts about the first 2 episodes that I watched on Disney+. I think the 3rd episode is already out, too. Let's talk about Max Fried. Max Fried comes from the Atlanta system. He has a record of 73-36 with a career ERA of 3.07. It seems to be a pretty good strikeout to walk ratio in his career. He's got let's see if I can find all these stats here. Last year, 174 innings pitched, 77 innings pitched the year before. Must have been an injury. 185 and 165 innings pitched in his stint from the ages of 27 to 30. This is a good ad, right? I mean, it's not Cole, but it's definitely gives you a little bit more stability than than rolling out Cole and Rodon, even though Rodon improved dramatically from where he was in 2022 when he came over and pitched half of the season. 2023 when he pitched the half of the season and came up in July 2nd. So definitely a good ad. The Yankees needed to get someone. If it was Max Fried or Corbin Burns, they needed to land someone, and they did just that. So give credit to the Yankees on that kind of addition. I'm excited to see him pitch. I'm excited to actually see a rotation that is resembling a little bit of the Clemens, Wells, Coney era, I think, or Mussina era. I can't. There was one where they were all together, right? When Wells came back, I can't remember exactly what the rotation was, but it was exciting to see each starting pitcher. So really, really looking forward to that. Drafted by the Padres in the first round of the 2012 Major League Amateur Draft. That's from Baseball Reference. So a good pickup for the Yankees. Hopefully it's just the beginning, and hopefully it's not the end. So let's take another quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about The Skeleton Crew, the new Star Wars show from Disney Plus, when we get back. Let's take a break. Hey, everybody. I am forgetting to raise that volume slider. Welcome back to the Powell Not Found podcast. Again, you can find all the full episodes of the show at YouTube at Powell Not Found. I'm going to try to change the way that I do a little bit of the posting around here. I'm going to try to break them up into more consumable parts and post the full episode at some point. Hopefully by the end of the week, so that it gets exposure and that there's an archive of it somewhere. But definitely wanted to kind of experiment a little bit more with smaller little chunks. One last thing. All this narrative that we've been talking about with Juan Soto, it's been about the money. It's been about the money, right? And today they did have Juan Soto's press conference, and he did address, right, whether it was about the money. And so I figured we can kind of shoot to that right now. So let's check this out.
I haven't talked to any of those guys. Definitely.
Last one is Manny Gomez.
Just first of all, felicidades, Juan. Secondly, have you been in touch with anybody from your former team, and can you share what those conversations with your now former team, the Yankees, and could you share what those conversations might have been like?
I haven't talked to any of those guys. Definitely. We talked to them through at the end of the playoffs, but after that I make these processes. I haven't talked to any of those guys.
Thank you very much. Before we bring up the rest of the family for some folks.
Didn't talk to one Yankee in the free agent period. Now, I don't know if you remember, but when Judge was a free agent, right? Sure, there were theatrics. Judge was walking through San Francisco. TMZ was just happened to be there to capture it. But there were reports that Garrett Cole was talking to him, that you know calls from veterans of Yankee history and lore. Derek Jeter was somehow involved, right? There were moments of trying to get him back on board, right? To be a Yankee, right? Even last year, Hideki Matsui talked to Yamamoto. The fact that Juan Soto said that no one reached out, you do get a sense of whether the Yankees, maybe they were hoping to not retain him. Maybe they were hoping not to spend that much money. It didn't seem like they were definitely going full throttle on Juan Soto, is the impression that I'm getting right now. And again, as a fan that didn't want to retain $765 million with the potential of $805 million on the payroll, I'm glad. But the fact that no one reached out to him is suspicious to me. It was also kind of suspicious too when they asked Judge earlier a couple weeks ago that he had not spoken to him because he was giving him his space. It's like, I don't know. It just didn't seem like they were going full throttle to me. Anyways. Well, with that, let me wrap up the Juan Soto talk, because that's about as long as someone can talk about Juan Soto, right? 45 minutes. And let's talk about the Skeleton Crew, this new show from Disney Plus.
Steve Cohen, the Mets owner, chairman, CEO,
I
and give a lot of love to his
have
wife,
been a lifelong
Alex, and
Star
rightly
Wars
so,
fan,
because
right?
one of the things we heard from
I
Juan
had
Soto
my
over
reservations
and over again
about
was the love they showed towards
Star Wars
not just
becoming a
Juan,
Disney
but
property
his family.
because
And
of
we
things
knew
like
going into
this,
this
where
was a big thing, but
they
really, to
expand
hear
the
it from
universe
Juan
so
right there,
much that
it was very
eventually it
clear how
becomes
important that
unrecognizable.
was.
I think
so
we've
the big
seen
question
that
on Sunday night,
happen
Gary,
with the
after
Marvel
this
universe,
decision
where
came down,
even the other
why
day
did
I
he
said
pick
to
the
someone
Mets?
that
It wasn't that
you
big
could
of a
put out
financial
any
difference
random
at
name,
the end of the day, and he did
and it
enjoy
would
being
probably
a Yankee.
be a
There's
Marvel
no question
character if you
about
look
that.
deep
So
enough.
digging into that a little
And
more,
that's
and
where
even
I feel
frankly,
like
Mets
we're
people were
getting
like,
with
so
with
why
Star
did he pick
Wars.
us? Why did we win this thing? And as
I don't
started to do some
necessarily always
reporting on
hold the
that,
same
things
view
are-
as the
things that
general
Soto just said out
zeitgeist
loud were
does
the
when it
exact
comes
kind
to
of
Star
things that
Wars. I
was
mean, I
hearing,
personally loved Solo, the
then
movie. I
think
thought it was
sort of widely
great.
reported
When it was
that
panned, I was
things
kind of
like
confused.
in the process, I mentioned at the top of the show that the Mets under
I tend
Alex
to like
Cohen
the
have
Book of Boba Fett.
gen-
I didn't really
created a
watch
general reputation
Ashoka.
for
I
being
didn't
family
watch
friendly,
these
but in this
new,
process, the Yankees have
new
policies
ones,
that they
even though
didn't
Andor
violate for Aaron
was,
Judge or for anybody else. So they
considered
weren't going
slow
to
in the
feel that they were
beginning.
able
I've
to change
heard
for
great
Soto.
things
For
about it.
example,
I am a big fan of
do you buy a
Obi-Wan.
player's
People are
suite?
not a big fan
with the
of
Yankees,
that
the player buys
series.
his own suite. The Mets are willing to be more flexible.
But I
with things
know
like that. Field passes,
for a
clubhouse
fact
access
that
for
one of the
kids.
big
These
criticisms
things do
of
not
Star
make
Wars
or break
in
a nearly
particular
$800 million
was
deal. But I'm telling you, this is a human being
the
that's sitting up
fact
there,
that it was
regardless of how
so
much he's worth. And these
tied
things
to the
mean a lot to
Skywalker
him.
saga
He's close with his family.
that
I was starting to
it
get
felt
into this
like
a little
each
bit
of
when
the
they took the
series
podium,
that would
but
come up
what Soto
subsequently
was
would
known to do for
always
the
have
Yankees
some
was show
tangential
up to the
connection
ballpark, put his
back to
AirPods
the
in,
original
work
series.
hard,
No
play
matter
hard,
how far you
hit
felt
like
you
a
were
future
going,
Hall of Famer, go
eventually
home,
all
where he
roads
lives with his
led
mom
to Luke.
in upstate
Right?
New York.
And that's where I feel like this new show, The Skeleton Crew, really
or anything like that.
shines,
He's a real,
right?
quiet kind of
It
family guy. So
doesn't seem
making
like
his
it
family
connects
feel
back
good,
to anything. And so much so that in the first couple episodes, and that was the 2 episodes that I've seen so far, so I can't really give it a true review. The first 2 episodes that I've seen focus so much on the mundane of life, the mundanity of life, that you feel like you're not even watching a Star Wars film anymore, which is funny, right? You see a dad give his son lunch money. You see a son complain about the lunch money. You see a son not want to study for an assessment test. You see kids that are sitting waiting to get placed in jobs. And there was about 20 minutes into the show where I said, you know what? I come to Star Wars to escape this, right? I don't know if I want to see it played out in some distant universe. So The Skeleton Crew, which again is on Disney Plus and has 2 episodes. I think the 3rd episode dropped a couple days ago. I haven't watched it, but the first 2 episodes dropped a couple weeks ago. Is a kids show, right? Let's call a spade, right? It's not. It is I want to say a Stranger Things like show in the Star Wars universe, in the fact that it stars like for kids, right? For younger than Luke type kids, like 12-year-olds seeking adventure, right? On this planet that seems to have everything kind of lined up. I watched 2 episodes. They're very quick. If you're looking for an easy kind of viewing experience, The Skeleton Crew is great, right? Don't expect too much from the writing. The writing is kind of it reminds me of just adults trying to write for kids, because it doesn't sound like a kid. The dialogue does not sound like what a kid would talk like, right? And it's just a little bit Disney-fied. It's a little bit kind of too polished to be actually kids. I'm not saying that you should inject Riz and Skibbity Toilet into every single conversation, but it doesn't sound natural in a way when you watch the show. And it's kind of boring in the beginning. It's very much a roller coaster in terms of emotion. The first 10 minutes of the film, and it's not 10 minutes, but the first 6 minutes or 2 minutes or whatever, the introduction to the universe shows you this eloquent scene and this beautifully filmed Star Wars scene about a ship getting kind of pirated and a ship being boarded by these space pirates. It's probably one of the best Star Wars sequences I have seen in quite some time. And it's very much reminds you that you're watching a Star Wars film. there is this tendency, I always feel like in a Star Wars film, is that you have about 2 minutes in the upfront to be introduced to the villain, who's always seems to be wearing like a garbage can on his head and has his voice modulated in some way, looking at you, Darth Vader, looking at you, Kylo Ren. And this show does not stray from that formula at all. Like, you get introduced to this mysterious villain right off the bat. You know who you're rooting against. You know it's Star Wars from the very, very beginning. After seeing something like that, the dip into the mundanity that you end up staying in for quite some time until about the end of the second episode, when things start getting kind of a little bit weird and things start building a little bit more, it just is such a harsh drop-off that you start going, is this Star Wars? Is this worth the time I'm going to be putting into it? Now, the Skeleton Crew seems to be running for an 8-episode run. I will tell you that if you get to the end of the second episode, where there's an introduction of a character that seems to be very crucial to the plot, at that point, you understand what they were setting up and what they were trying to lay the foundation for. They take a long time to do it, but it seems at this point to be worth the time and energy to put into. It seems like it's going to get better and better by the second. It just kind of almost tricks you into a boring beginning that might put off a bunch of people from watching the show. But I implore everyone to go do it. Go check out the first 2 episodes. See what I'm talking about with this show. I'm curious to see how it turns out. I'm curious to see how the kid leads work out in this show, because they do interact like kids, and if you're not, used to kids interacting with each other, right? Like, they do kind of grind on your gears a little bit as an adult, going like, oh, they're just like, they're complaining with each other so much and blah, 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 blah. But it's fun to see that dynamic. I'm hoping that dynamic matures throughout the episodes and it becomes a little bit more endearing over time. And now that they have someone to play off of in the end of the second episode, I'm hoping that it gets better. But it seems like after watching a lot of Star Wars, you get the sense that it doesn't take much for you to get into the action of Star Wars. This one did. And that's, I feel like, the difference between the series and the movie series of Star Wars is that the movies don't have enough time to do this. They don't have enough time to get you bored. They have to get into the action right away and hook you. While the TV series seem to be a little bit more meandering, and they tend to take their sweet time laying a lot of exposition before they actually get into the crux and the hook of the show. I know for the fact, even though this mad success that The Mandalorian had the same problem. The first episode, you're like, what am I watching this for? Right? It's Star Wars. It's beautiful. It's incredible. The sets, the lighting design, the alien design, I mean, the puppetry, it's great. The CGI, unbelievable. But again, there's a lot of stuff to choose from. And so if the show doesn't get going, you do feel like, I don't want to waste 40 minutes of my time. But this show does seem to kind of be revving its engine, and finally it's getting going. So hopefully it will be more of a Lewis Hamilton at Abu Dhabi, if you get the reference. His last race with Mercedes, going from the back of the grid all the way to the front of the grid to 4th place. Hopefully it will be that kind of show for Disney Plus, and that's the Skeleton Crew. 3 episodes are out. It's an 8-episode run in all, and I'm excited to see more of it. So right now, an okay review. I'm hoping that by the end of the series, I see the whole thing, that it's going to be better. But with that, we're going to wrap up the show. It's been a wrong set. See, this is what happens when you do production at night. It just gets a little bit sloppy. Here we go. Boom. This is the right sound. Thank you guys for watching the show. We're going to have one more before we close out for the year, and then we'll be back in the new year. We will have, it looks like 48. I think I messed up the numbers somewhere along the line. We'll have 48 shows all in all by the end of the year. We've had a lot of success according to my personal metric. I want to thank everybody for joining the show, for listening to the show, for being patient, friends and families and everybody else for coming and supporting me along this journey for a year. Wow, it's been a year of the Powell Not Found podcast. So thank you for listening. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for listening to all the things that I want to talk about here on the show. Have a good weekend, everybody. And again, Juan Soto is a Met, getting paid $250 million, $750 million to hit a ball. Unbelievable.
Tries to shake it off. She's losing track of the days. So she's been dancing to the music blaring from the Renegade. And in the morning she lays.